This is the 5-minute guide to the B65 class, never-built battlecruisers of the Imperial Japanese Navy.
So if you thought the origins of the Salamis class went back a bit, the B65's origins go back even further. The B65, along with the majority of the Japanese fleet of the Second World War, traces its origins all the way back to the pre-Dreadnought age. Japan's only major war against an opponent of a similar technological and organizational level to itself in the modern era had been against Russia in the early 1900s, and this war's primary turning point had been the Battle of Tsushima. That the war was essentially decided in a single day strongly influenced the creation of the Imperial Japanese Navy's decisive battle doctrine, which would become their primary strategy for defeating any major naval opponent. This strategy consisted of four main components: a reliance on quality over quantity in naval weaponry due to the fact that countries like the British Empire or the United States of America could easily outbuild Japan numerically; attrition tactics against a numerically superior enemy, hence the development of a strong carrier arm; the employment of nighttime torpedo attacks, which dictated the development of powerful torpedoes like the Long Lance, and destroyers that were mainly dedicated to torpedo use; and finally, a decisive surface fleet engagement determined by big guns, after the enemy fleet had been suitably reduced. After the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 and the London Naval Treaty of 1930 placed restrictions on the size of the Japanese fleet compared to the American and British fleets, this strategy was crystallized in Japanese thought, and they formed the night battle force, the so-called Yansen Butai. This was designed to attack the enemy's outer defense and scouting ring of cruisers and destroyers at night. After cracking this outer defense ring, the cruisers and destroyers were to launch torpedo attacks on the enemy battleships. What was left of the enemy fleet was then to be finished off by the Japanese main battleship line the following day. If this idea of taking out the enemy's fleet screen as a prelude to a major battle sounds familiar, especially against a numerically superior enemy, this is because this is exactly the strategy that both British and German battlecruisers ended up being targeted at in the First World War. Now, having learned from that conflict, the Japanese assigned a division of fast battleships or battlecruisers to give additional firepower to these nocturnal attacks. The Congo-class battlecruisers were initially assigned to this role and were upgraded to fast battleships between 1933 and 1940. But as these ships were the oldest capital ships in the fleet, a plan was made to replace the four Congos with four heavy or supercruisers. These would mount 12-inch guns, carry armor designed to withstand hits from 8-inch shells, and be capable of speeds of up to 40 knots. And if you've heard similar reasoning for this sort of ship before, again, this was exactly the kind of thinking behind the first battlecruisers and the Stalingrad-class ships of the USSR. 6 of these ships were planned in 2 batches, but as time came to finalize the design, Japanese intelligence had learned the specifications for the United States' Alaska class and believed that these ships would form part of the American battle fleet screen in times of war. Thus, the B-65s changed role and were now intended to counter the threat posed by the Alaska-class cruisers, which were again designed with pretty much the same cruiser-killing purposes in mind. Basically, the whole exercise on all sides was a rerun of the original battlecruiser development in the late 1900s, complete with shades of changing roles of British and German battlecruiser designs in the run-up to the First World War. These plans bore a striking resemblance to the Yamato-class battleships, albeit at a marginally reduced size. Primary weapons were to be 9 12.2-inch 50 caliber guns in 3 triple turrets with a pair super firing at the front and a single turret at the rear, 2 quadruple torpedo tubes firing the excellent Type 93 Long Lance torpedo, and a secondary battery of 16 3.9-inch dual-purpose guns in dual mounts, 12 paired 25mm anti-aircraft guns, and 4 13.2mm machine guns. Armor would consist of a 7.5-inch belt sloped at 20 degrees and 4.9 inches of deck armor. Maximum speed is eventually settled at 34 knots. Up to this point, the design had actually been called the B-64. However, with the Alaska-class cruisers' capabilities known, it was upgraded to B-65, And in an attempt to counter the Alaska class's own 12-inch guns, it was suggested that the triple turrets could be swapped for 3 twin 14-inch turrets, with armor protection to resist this kind of firepower. However, this would have increased the displacement of a so-called cruiser, really a battle cruiser, to almost 40,000 tons, and meant nothing came of this particular proposal. As war with the United States loomed in 1941, Japan found it had more pressing needs for aircraft carriers, auxiliary vessels, and such like. This need, plus a desire to complete the currently ongoing construction programs, delayed the initiation of the wave of construction that included the first B-65s. Following the Japanese Navy's defeat at the Battle of Midway in June 1942, this plan was significantly revised, and the follow-on plan that had the other 3 ships in it was postponed indefinitely. The revised plan still called for the construction of 2 ships to this design, which were given the hull numbers 795 and 796, and which were projected to come into service in 1945 and 1946 respectively. But as the war continued to progress, strategic requirements further delayed the plans for the 2 cruisers, and in the end, no contracts for their construction were ever placed.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or a suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.